Okay, thanks everybody for coming again. This is our 21st webinar of 2021, and it is our 160 I'm sorry 95th overall of our webinar series that we started back last March. We're going to reference one of the very first webinar today with some of the stuff we're going to talk about and link it so you can go see that. If we are recording this live with some folks watching here, and we got a chat box that we're talking with those folks about. But if you're watching this on YouTube later, all of the links that we're going to talk about are going to be down, links, documents, anything we do. This presentation is going to be down in the linked in the description box below on YouTube. So if I mention something about looking at the link and grabbing that, you can find it also in the description box below. Okay. Been looking forward to this guest for quite some time. Been talking about different ways that we use data, and one of the big ways Micron AIM sports data loggers are used with our Micron line is in karting, and and a big subset of that is oval, and especially dirt oval. So I've been chatting with David for a couple of years now and talking back and forth, and he has just taken this ball to learn more about this and start helping people and supporting the users, and just looking forward to chatting with him today. So we brought David from KartSpeed Solutions. He's going to join us today, and we're going to talk about dirt oval. And one of the cool things I have found out about data is there's a lot of forms of motorsports that I've never done, and but every time I chat with somebody or I go to a track of off-road racing or dirt karts or motorcycles or whatever it happens to be, when I look at the data is always basically the same task. You're using data to look at the physics and the engine stuff and all these different things to go faster. And so while we are going to talk with some specific focus on dirt oval today, David's going to share with us some tips and tricks that he's learned about looking at data in dirt oval, but they very much cross over. So it very much looking forward to this, and I hope you are as well as you watch this and get some good tips and tricks on how to look at data no matter what form of motorsports that you're in. So it will be a good time. Let's slide up a slide here and introduce David to you guys. David is the owner of KartSpeed Solutions, and David has been around kart racing a long time. I asked for a quick little bio as we've been chatting, and he mentions he started racing at 9 years old, and he's been dirt kart oval racing since 1990. And I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, well, to do the math, get out a calculator, too many fingers and toes, right? So a lot of years he's been in the dirt kart oval racing scene. So a lot of experience, and boy, you can sure hear that when you chat with him. You're going to hear that from him today. And he's got a couple of sons that are also doing dirt kart oval racing now, with Jack being 12 and Gavin being 8. And so as he's been playing with these gauges and learning a little bit more, he has seen that there's a need out there for people that want to take their Micron and take it from being a lap timer and a cylinder head temp or water temp or whatever it is that they're looking at, and leverage that investment to even more. And when he started answering some questions as he was learning more, he decided to start up his company KartSpeed Solutions, and he's got a mind for looking at the data and looking at these kind of things using performance analytics. We've talked a little bit about those terms in previous webinars as well, and he really works hard at strong customer relationships. Meets the people, they become friends, and he's helping them, and they're contacting him after the races and going over little things here and there. So it's been a great relationship. Really proud to have him out there, helping all of the AIM users. So David, welcome to our webinar, and I sure appreciate you coming. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm glad to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having me, and it's an honor and a joy to be here. I love talking racing, and I love talking data, so it's like the perfect spot for me.
With that accent, it doesn't sound like you're from Southern California. Where are you located? Where part of the world are you in where they can find you at tracks?
Well, I live in Leland, North Carolina, which is about 10 miles from Wilmington, North Carolina, which is on the opposite coast. But I travel up and down North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, pretty much the melting pot for dirt oval racing. So you'll see me on the coast.
Perfect. And your KartSpeed is a company that you've started. How long ago did you start that officially?
We actually went live in January.
January. Perfect.
January. Yep.
And do you have a website or a Facebook page? How do you get some information out?
I have a Facebook page, KartSpeed Solutions.
Perfect.
And that's where I do a lot of my communicating with customers and that kind of thing. I try to stay in communication with them a lot, through messages, through email, but a lot of it's through Facebook.
Yeah, perfect. Robbie Emiliano has linked your Facebook page in the
nice
in the chat, and of course it will be linked in for those of you watching on YouTube later. It will be linked in the description down below, as well as some other contact information for David as we get going. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time. Let's chat a little bit about okay, we got a Micron, we've got a kart, and you're showing up and you're working with your wandering around. Maybe you're racing even sometimes. I know you with your kids and some. Do you still drive? Do you still drive?
No.
Okay.
I'm too old for that. That's a young man sport. I can get into the go-kart. Getting me out would be the problem.
Especially after a heat race, right?
Yeah, I would have to just stay there the whole day, maybe even a couple days after the fact.
Which is an interesting thing, since we have a lot of road racers that join us here. When we look at data here in about 10 minutes, there will be some subtle differences that you're going to see, and one of them is the lateral G's, and that since he's turning left all the time in these cars, even on the straightaway they're running at fairly high G's, because big arc going into the next corner, and then we never see G's the one direction, obviously, or at least we hope so. So it's going to be interesting to see how David sets it up, and we talk about some different things, but it also is hard on the body and the neck with long main events, because there's a lot of grip on the dirt, contrary to what you might think, right?
Yeah, if you see positive G's in my form of racing, we have problems.
we have issues, right? So perfect. So let's talk about the one, as we were kind of chatting leading up to this. Well, I wanted this really to be a kind of a start at the beginning, chat about some things that you see in supporting of the dirt kart oval guys, and some of the things that when you walk up to somebody and you're going to help them for the first time, what is some of the stuff that's important to you? You gave me a little bit of a list here. Let's go through those and chat about them. Not how to do it, but this is good for everybody, whether you're dirt kart oval or racing with any other AIM device. These are just good tips to have, but stuff you see a lot of in the dirt oval field.
Yeah, my main thing is organization. You got to keep a clean house. It makes, at the racetrack, the big thing you're fighting is time. Between on-track sessions, you might have only 10, 15 minutes before you go back out. So if you're having a problem, or if you're trying to download data and take a look at it, the more organized you are, the quicker you can do things and more efficient you become. So one of the main things I look at, when a customer comes to me and wants me to pull data from their Micron or is having an issue, one is their name on the Micron. Down at the ID number does their name pop up? And the reason why that's big is because everybody uses Micron 5s. About 98% of them have Micron 5s. So when you go to pull up the Wi-Fi, there's like 20 of them.
They're everywhere.
And you're trying to figure out, because the pit spaces are so close together. So that's number one. Then the next thing I check is the firmware. Has it been updated? Does it have the latest and greatest firmware in it? And the reason why I look for that is because the firmware updates fix a lot of problems. They really do. A lot of bugs, like for instance, I believe it's the 1.16. A lot of the times when you go to download the data, it doesn't have lap numbers or times beside the data. which when you're trying to figure out, is it a qualifying run? Is it the heat race? Or which one you want to download to look at? That makes a big difference as far as time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Micron 5, and AIM generally speaking, obviously, that when we see any sort of a problem, that boy, they're all over that.
Yeah.
Updating a firmware to fix any sort of a problem. And your first bulleted item there is great for anybody, no matter what form of motorsports you're in. It's just it's a bigger issue when, like you say, you've got 100 carts and they're all within 100 feet, right? More or less, right? In a paddock area in the middle of a dirt track. And so you end up with, you see everyone that is turned on when you turn yours on. And if you don't have something, maybe it's your name, maybe it's a cart number, maybe it's a spoof names, but something instead of a 5-digit serial number, right? So both of those are good tips for not only dirt oval guys, but everybody.
Yeah, and because again, if you say 5 minutes, that's huge, because that's 5 minutes more you can put into trying to get faster and better the next time you go out.
And some of your heat races and practices, I mean, they're happening in a hurry, right? So you don't have much time in between.
We went to a track, I don't know, a few months ago, and there was only about 17 minutes from the time we got off the track to our next session back on it. You could barely take tires off, wash them, and get them back on the go-kart to go back out.
And while we always preach that, and it's important, we're not just saying it because it's you should try to get the data off every time, and at least get it off and give it that cursory look. But sometimes you just do not have time, like you say. You've got 2 kids, so you got 2 carts, or maybe even 3 or 4 depending on classes. Double trouble, there you go. And you got to check tires, you've got to check gearing, you got to lube the chain, you've got to, all these things have to be done, and you got to get the kids a little water, and it just takes a lot of time. The other one was setting the correct date and time. That's such an important thing, because of that is what's time stamping the files. And Micron 5 early on did not have this option, and as well as all of our other hardware. You could actually go in and pick the time zone and some of those, and then the GPS would set the correct hours and minutes, right? Well, we've got an option now that if you go into it with one of the firmwares that came out a while back, you can now enable GPS time sync. So it's not only setting the correct hours and minutes, but it's actually knowing where you're at, understanding the Earth in this time zone, and setting it correctly. So you can leave it on and not use that, and actually set it the normal way, or enable that button in the menu item, and that will be a big help. I know you've seen that problem in the past, and people come up to you with their laptops and trying to get in it's way down in the list because it had the wrong time and date stamp, right? So
that's a big deal, because again, keeping it organized. When you're there's only a handful of times I've ever been to the track and not been short of time.
Exactly.
And anything that you can do, again, to make the situation more convenient and more efficient, makes it easier. And making sure the dates and times are correct, where you don't have to go digging for the session that you're at, is a big deal.
And you just said something there that strikes me again, across motorsports, forms of motorsports, time is your most valuable thing at a racetrack. It's not which tires you have. Those are all valuable, but it's time really is your most valuable thing. And then the last one, checking to make sure the correct track is loaded.
Yep, because a lot of times, I'll go into someone's Micron and they don't even have the GPS coordinate track loaded up on it. It's the Micron went to a track learning, and it's some kind of random name they put on it because they didn't have time to name it. And so that stuff, again, is a big deal, because it keeps everything organized, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but that's almost like number one in my book, because it's not just what you're doing at the track that day. It's, 3-4 days after the fact, when you're digging back through your data, trying to find improvements so you can come out the trailer faster the next time you go.
And that's a great point. These top tips that everyone, as you were just saying that, I read through them again. Every one of these can and should be part of your pre-race checklist before you ever leave your garage or your shop, right? These are things that you can do at home before you even leave. And so when you get to the track, you turn it on and you're ready to go. You know where you're heading. So make sure that track is in memory. And as we are relying more and more on GPS and some of that information, we're leveraging that location data, knowing that you're at that track. We know the time zone that there's some things we know because of you selecting that track, which makes the experience more powerful and easier for the user. So make sure you select the right track.
Yeah, I agree, because preparation meets opportunity, that equals success.
Yeah,
Yes.
and going fast is what we're really after. So let's talk about a couple of things before we get into the live data that some people may not know that are watching this or watching this later. That your Micron 5 has a dedicated firmware specifically designed for oval kart racers. I think a good number of people know this, but I include that here, and a link to the guide here in the presentation. We'll also have the link in the chat and in the YouTube description box below. You can grab that document. It's going to show you how to turn that on and make sure that's set up and running. And it just gives, we're not going to go deep into it, but it gives you as a user a recall screens that are really focused on what you guys look for in oval track
Right.
mode. So you've been using this. Are you fairly happy with what you get out of that?
Yes, very much so. The road racing, for road course guys, it has some pages in it where it deals with, linear acceleration and stuff like that, where on the oval side, it will give you a lateral grip graph, and it breaks down things just a little bit different that kind of caters to oval track racing,
Right.
Which I think is extremely helpful. Especially when you're at the racetrack, you only have a few seconds to look at things. You try to get as much data and information as you can to make a good decision.
Because
And
again,
it makes it.
because again, like you mentioned a minute ago, you have one time you had 17 minutes to get off the track, fix everything, get some water in the kids, lube the chain, change the tire, and
then
17 minutes. Boy, if you can go right to the gauge and get one of the big ones for that is included in this oval kart mode is the speed and the RPM drop in the corners, which is a big part of
Yes.
how you are tuning and understanding what your tune is as far as the chassis and stuff. And being able to have that just correctly displayed for you very quickly is been very helpful to oval track guys. So perfect. Oops, I didn't. This is one that I was going to cover a little bit instead of David, and it's become it's important for all of us, dirt kart guys, road racers, drag racers, whoever it is, whatever you're using AIM products for, is going through these data download preferences on your computer before you start downloading data, at least data at the track when things are happening and you're trying to get everything set up. I'm not going to go through every step of this, obviously, but this is what I'm showing here is a dialog box that comes up, your data download preferences. You can get that from once you're connected to your gauge, or you can get it from even ahead of time from the options pull down menu. And what we've done is given you a couple of options here to go learn more about it. The very first webinar we did in this series, we did on March 31st of 2020, and we called it Race Studio 3 Data Download Options. And this is for everybody, whether it's a Micron 5 or an MXG. Looking at that video, that webinar, will go through these tabs and give you an idea of why it's important to make sure you know where your data is going on your computer, and even more so the file naming structure, and making sure that is set up for you. And boy, it sure is nice when you just connect with the Wi-Fi, push a button, and it has already found the right folder for it, already give it the right name, where you know where to go look for it, and boom, you're off and running. So if anybody gets a chance, and you still don't understand, maybe if you've got this quite right, there's a couple of options there for you to learn more about the data download preferences and getting those set up correctly for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good webinar. I learned a lot from that one. Just how you set them up, and just to, again, keep everything organized in certain files, and stop, when you go to download information on the racetrack, if you don't have that set up right, it will stop you from downloading it, and it says there's an error.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. The biggest one is when you're under the file name. When I probably should have used that as the screen capture. But under file name, if you do not have the date and time in there, something to give it to name that file differently, you try to stuff that into the same folder, you're going to get this message that pops up and says that file already exists. Do you want to
this.
delete it or overwrite it? And when you got 17 minutes, you're trying to download your data. It's just a pain in the butt to go through the steps to resolve that, and just don't need that added stress in your life. Just do all this stuff ahead of time. It was our very first webinar for a reason. It was the most important thing that we could do to get information out for folks that is going to give a long payoff of understanding it. So take a look back at that live webinar if you haven't done that, and get that taken care of. The other thing that you see a lot, and we'll talk about why and why it's even more important with in karting, is installations. They're all pretty good, right? They're all going to work, and they do what they should do. And we've kind of very
Functions.
strongly labeled them incorrect and correct. And I fought myself on, okay, what word should I use? But one is good and one is better, right? So give us an idea of what we're looking at here with these two images, and why it's important for you to get that thing mounted maybe in a better way.
Right. In both ways are functional. You can go racing and still get good data from the picture over on the left. But the big difference is, go-karts, and I can't speak for race cars, but I know for a fact go-karts are very noisy, a lot of vibrations. And when you're trying to look at data, you want to cut as much white noise out of your data stream as possible. So whenever you mount it on, like if you look on the left, how it's mounted on the actual steering shaft, not only are you getting vibration up through the chassis, but you're also getting vibration through the steering shaft because it's not bolted down tight. It has to have some movement in it so you can turn the steering wheel and whatnot. And that causes issues, especially when you want to look at like the accelerometer Z, to see if the go-kart's hitting bumps, what's causing it to lose bite. Well, that's a useful channel that sometimes when you mount it to the steering shaft, you kind of lose that ability. If you look over here on the right picture, the correct picture, the only real difference is this one is bolted to the actual chassis itself. So it is one piece, it is bolted, to the actual chassis, which makes it a whole lot easier, to use a lot of the gyro sensors in the Micron, for yaw rates, and things like that, because now the Micron's not moving, it is stationary. So, which I think is a big deal.
Yeah, there is a lot of harmonics and a lot of vibrations inherent in karting, and then you put them on dirt where you're running through the rumble strips and all the different things that they do, and boy, we'll see the data is already just a little bit noisy. The traces will have a little bit of that, but you have made it better by not only mounting it to the chassis, but then you also used two straps here where just the one, it would still have some wobble, maybe even on top of the steering shaft moving with the steering wheel, but then the harmonics of it just vibrating in the wind, where two of them is kind of triangulating that a little bit to keep a little bit of that down.
Because my motto is you want to take out all the variables as possible. I don't want to manipulate the data in any way. I want raw, true data of what's happening.
Yeah, perfect. So this is a good example of that, and we only used a couple of data system installations, as much for just to get people's mind thinking about different things. This is good and true in the off-road world, sports car world. How do you have it mounted? Are you using the little rubber mounts? Are you mounting it solid? Do you have it rotated slightly? Just some things to open our minds and think about. It might be worthwhile just to chat about. Oops. And then the other one, and you and I and with me to chatting with
a constant fight.
Chatting with 8 or 10 people this season probably on the inductive RPM. The Micron 5 picks up its RPM in a different way than some of our other systems. And we have an RPM sensor that comes up and wraps around the primary lead on the heading to the spark plug, and we sense each spark that is through there, and we're grabbing that information, sending it back to the Micron and showing an RPM, right? And of course, gathering it and displaying it later in the data. There's a right and a wrong way to do that. And the Micron 5 is pretty sensitive on the RPM to make sure we do as good a job as we can. And
Yes.
this is what we're going to call an incorrect way. You've wrapped around the RPM cable around this lead a bunch of times, and what is happening there is it's getting a bigger and bigger hit. With you're doubling it every time you wrap an additional hit around it, right? And when that primary lead sees that big spark, all of a sudden the Micron is overwhelmed with a huge signal. How much do you see this in the real world, and how did you ended up solving this, and what did you see in the data when you ran it a little bit more kind of what I'll call standard there on the right side?
Yeah, so I run into this all the time. This is a very, very common issue, especially with the clone motors. Um, a lot of times what you'll see in the RPM trace is, just where the Micron is trying to smooth out the trace, and it jumps. Sometimes it will just jump low and you'll get like a 2300 RPM drop, or it will spike high and low, and you think that you're turning 500 more RPMs than you actually are. And it's because, again, like you said, Roger, that it's picking up so many different points, and it's getting overwhelmed with signal, especially with the 5S, because it's way more sensitive than the regular 5 is. On the right, that's how AIM says do it in the owner's manual, and it does. It helps out a lot because it cuts out all that extra noise, and you end up getting a smoother signal, and which comes out to a smoother trace, which again in dirt racing is really important because there's a whole lot, like you said in the last slide, there's a lot of harmonics and noise going around that you want your data as clean as possible.
Absolutely. And RPM is a big part of what you guys are looking for. You're looking for that RPM
Yes.
drop in the corners. You're looking to gear to have it pull off the corner, but not get up to the rev limiter at the end of the straightaways. RPM is a big part of what you're really looking for. And if you don't have a good signal, you're behind.
And sometimes not just geared, chassis adjustments to see where the go-kart's gotten better around the turns.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Almost every data sample we're going to look at in the next couple slides is going to be A versus B, and you made a change, and let's look at it, right? We're going to do true data analysis here, not just looking at some single run graphs as well. So it'll be kind of fun. And there is one other option that actually is probably better. You've gotten such good results out of once you change the wire to look something like on the right. But we do have the option of connecting that RPM wire in a different way than I know that you're thinking about trying, but soon. And I hear that it's gives even a cleaner signal. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so that's going through the ground wire through the kill switch of the clone motors, which I haven't done that yet, but the motors that I use, they use the kill switch, and sometimes I get a little iffy about messing with the kill switch because an 8-year-old, something gets out of control, I want him to be able to reach over there and turn the engine off and feel comfortable with doing it. So I haven't really dug too deep into that, but yeah, it will give you a clean signal because it's pulling the ground straight from the coil, which is
it's harder to get to for you, and you have everything all mounted. And this method right out of the AIM user manual ended up giving you a signal that was as good as you had hoped for. So you've just retained it, right? So perfect.
Sometimes
Okay.
if it's not broke, don't try to fix it.
There you go. There's something to be said for that, right? The last thing I want to chat about with Microns, and before we get into data, is as the top line says, this webinar will be focusing mostly on data available from a Micron 5 without any additional sensors, right? That we try to do a lot of that, but if you have a Micron and you're looking to add some analog channels, we have a tool for that, the Micron Expansion, and it can be when you connect that with your Micron, you can do pedal, typically in the dirt side and in kart racing, pedal positions, throttle and brake positions, and steering, and other things you might want, a wheel speed sensor, or an additional water temp, a different additional temperature sensor, things like that. We're not going to show a ton of data like that. We wanted to do this one kind of as a basic, but we're going to see one set of slides, one set of live data we're going to look at that does have a steering sensor. And this is how David set that up, was via a Micron Expansion, right?
Yeah, and in the Micron, AIM has done a great job of making it very plug and play and very easy to use with not a whole lot of wiring or anything like that. Like it was pretty amazing to me how easy it was to set it up and to go right to the track with it without a whole lot of calibration or things like that. It was extremely easy.
Kyle asked a question here, David, that might be good just before we go into the live data. How do you use data to help set up between a flat track and a bank track? You run a bunch of different tracks. How do you use data differently from a flat track versus one that has a lot of banking? Is there any big difference, or are you just still looking at the same basic things?
For the most part, you still look at the same things. But the way the bank track, depending on the banking, depending on the radius of the turn, a couple different things will change, like your lateral G graphs. It will change acceleration. With a really banked track, I start looking at slope. Is the go-kart climbing uphill, coming out of turns? That will really affect the driving line of a driver. Quite typically, a lot of people think, you down low on the turns, up high on the straightaways, but if the track gets really banked, sometimes it's better to pinch it and cut it low, come off the turn, so the go-kart doesn't take so much of an incline coming out of the turn on really heavily banked tracks. But I still use, for the most part, the same basic data strategy. The traces do look a little bit different, but for the most part, it's the same.
Yeah. Especially even when you're in a car and you're running around on a bank track, you're still driving to that same feel, right? Even though you're being planted harder into the banking, it still feels the same to you as a driver, right? So it feels the same to the data.
The data same. Now the physics of what's going on to the actual kart changes a little bit. How the outer tires, how the lateral load of the tires and stuff like that changes. How the tire distorts and slip angles. But far as the data and what I see on the graphs, I still use them the same way.
But just with the knowledge that the track is a little bit more banked. And the other thing at karts, they have to lift that inside tire, or else it's going to understeer, right? It's going to push. And the more push, yeah, exactly. So the more banked the track is, the more that it's hard to get that inside tire to come up, right? So you may end up with a couple of different chassis setup differences, right, in order to help free up that inside tire.
Yes, sir.
Interesting stuff. The next one, we're going to go right into look at some data, and we're going to start fairly slow, but as far as literally starting slow, we're going to start with a 0 mile an hour chunk of data. But David's found some pretty cool ways that they do some things. I'm going to bring up the data real fast.
This is my first data
slide. This is his favorite part, yeah. But a couple of caveats of the way that this racing it happens down in the southeast of the states where David's from. There is some things that they do that many of our longtime watchers here, or people that are watching this video maybe later, don't deal with, and that is the tires and chemicals, things they can do to the tires. 100% legal. Everybody's doing it, and one of the things that is important with these low horsepower karts, I mean, some of these are junior 1 and junior 2 karts. I think this is probably a junior 2 here, right? They're low horsepower, and so you're pretty much flat the entire time. And if you put the chemicals on these tires, the rolling resistance ends up getting so much larger that it overcomes any gain you make in the corners, right? So you overstick the kart. One of the David recognized that fairly early, and one of the things that one of the way he uses data is to leave the paddock area after this tire change or this chemical change, maybe wipe something onto the tread area, and then he has done this enough where he's become pretty good about when to add this stuff and when not to, based on this slide. So tell us what we have here, David, and just a little bit of a background and what we're looking at.
Sure. Okay, so like Roger was saying, the tire game in dirt kart racing, I believe is probably really different than most motorsports. In that we are allowed to chemically change the tire. So what you'll have is when people go racing at these dirt races, they'll have anywhere between 3 sets of tires in the trailer on up to about 50 sets, depending on the track. And what they're looking at is the right amount of grip that the tire will provide for the corner, but also the right amount of rolling resistance. Because sometimes you can add a lot of grip and it will slow the go-kart down the straightaway because it has too much grip and it won't allow it to roll down the straightaway, what they call roll speed in our form of racing. What you're looking at is two different runs that started from a dead stop on the grid. The only difference, the gear is the same, the air pressure is the same. The only thing different is the age of the tire, two different sets of tires. And basically, you're seeing it from a dead stop on up to probably around I would say the 300-foot mark. You can see how, the clutch engages and how the go-kart accelerates. And you can see a different set of tires actually accelerate faster because the roll resistance in the tire itself is different. And that is huge, huge. And that's probably what 90% of people talk about at the dirt oval tracks is roll speed.
And it's one of those things that's certainly happening while you're out on the track, but it's hard to measure because of your corner speed and moving around and racing. So what you guys have done, and just to give a little bit of a technical standpoint on the data itself, we've gone to time mode because they're actually starting from a dead stop. We've scaled the GPS to be -10 up to whatever, in this case about 50. So this is flat. This is when the driver came to a stop and hammered the throttle, and the little clutch is working right here, and the thing is accelerating. You can by having speed and RPM, you're able to see exactly when the driver floors it. You can see the RPM pop up and the clutch start to work and the kart starts to roll. And because of that, now we can put the cursor right here where it's at 0 miles an hour for both, and we can come up here right when the clutch is starting to engage on the two different runs, just before maybe come in right in this area when it's engaging. And that one kart is 2.5 miles per hour faster over that same distance. And that's that tire roll that you're talking about, in ways that David has come along to understand it and be able to just see it and repeat it, right, and try it a couple different times and absolutely answer that question. Kind of a cool and different way of using data.
Yeah, and another thing too, it also can judge, how the actual chassis itself is rolling. When you make a chassis change, especially at like a test session, and you go out, it's a wonderful way to see if the changes you made help the rolling resistance of the chassis itself. Roll the best it can. Back in the day, we used to sit at the end of driveways and push it and see how far it could go. And trying to get the camber and caster right, trying to get the go-kart to roll as free as possible. Well, because of data, you can now look at it in real-time settings and real race situations to see if your changes actually increase the roll speed of the go-kart or the tire setup.
Yeah, it's that's one of those things that you get more data. Sometimes we see that the red line's faster, and then the question becomes, was it a chassis change or was it the chemical change? Or but we've narrowed it down to, we know there's something happening here. Data is always one of those things, the more you have, the more you want, right? So
it's a rabbit hole.
If you did this back to back, there is and you only made one change, you can kind of understand what it was and how good it was. The second thing I know you wanted to talk about here was just a little bit of an outside the box way of checking your clutches. Clutches are so important in kart racing, and this is kind of a cool tool. I'll explain what we're looking at here really quickly, and then you give me a little bit of information as well. Whenever you want to check what the RPM or the stall speed of your clutch is, you bring up your speed and you bring up your RPM trace. Whenever your driver puts it to the floor, you can see the RPM jump up. If you had a pedal position sensor, you could use that as well. But when the RPM is sitting here flat and the speed is gaining, it's in a kart with these slipper clutches. This is your stall speed, right? And this is and this is adjustable. And when you get your engine from your engine builder, they'll tell you a number of horsepower and what the torque is and what RPM that peak torque
Right.
was or whatever it was. And what you're really shooting for is to put this value around 3,400 here in this particular instance at the peak torque of the motor. The question though becomes, and you can see it here, and I'll let you answer some specifics, but you can see that the clutch takes a second to hit, and then it comes down, and you can see that let's just focus on the yellow one for a second. It was a guess, and of course I was wrong. We'll just use the one of them. You can see here that now we're approaching, we're up there at 4.3 miles per hour. The clutch is kind of taking it's settled down, and it's got a good clamp, and it's starting to accelerate. But watch 3,400 here. And by the time it just about locks up solid and is still running, let's say right here at 28 miles an hour, it's 100 RPM off, right? So this is dropping as it goes. Not very bad, by the way. We see a lot worse than that. In a perfect world, if you knew that 3,400 was the number, you'd want that clutch to hit and just sit there, right?
Right.
So we see this dropping a little bit. I'm going to bring up that other data back on here. You're looking at those clutch information as a data guy and a tuner of these things. What do you see there, and what would you want to adjust, if anything? I mean, it's not too bad, certainly.
Right. So, one of the things, again, like he was saying, if it's dipping, if you see your RPMs dip off that line, then more than likely, it's not turning, the engine's not turning up, and it's not in the torque zone of the engine, because you want it to pull straight and not dip or bog the engine in any way. Back in the day, before we had access to stuff like this, you would put the go-kart up on the stand, and you put your hand on the tire, and you kind of rev up the engine and feel the tire tug and look at the tach and go, okay, 3,300 RPMs is where the clutch is engaging. This allows you to get a real world look. The tires are under load, it's under weight. What's happening? Because like they always say, the old proverb of racing, you can't win a race in the first lap, but you sure can lose one. and that again, starts are just as important as the end of the race. And this helps you get the most out of your equipment without leaving anything on the table, man, because racing's hard. You're trying to put your best foot forward. I don't want to leave tents, back at the trailer.
Yeah, and some people will think, until they think this through a little more and have some data to really see it, but you're not down in that RPM range. And we look at some more data here in just a second when we see the full laps. You're not in the 3,400 range during a lap, so people don't worry about their clutches. But what they don't understand is you have starts and you have restarts. And you and I were chatting the other day about your kid knows that his clutch is well tuned. They've adjusted it well. You keep them fresh and you keep them adjusted well. And now he's on pull for a restart, and he's coming down, and he on purpose goes to a low speed start because he's pretty confident that that's an advantage he has over the guy next to him. So you're ending up forcing everybody to be on the clutch as for a restart, when you could have as easily just went a little faster and not done that, but it was an advantage. And because of data, you have figured out ways of making sure that's working correctly.
Well, another good side of data that you don't really talk about a whole lot is driver confidence. One thing I can say about, especially my 12-year-old, because he's getting to the age where he's really getting into racing a lot and how racing works, is the confidence level that when he goes on the racetrack, he knows his clutch is the best that it can be. He knows, when I go for a start, that I got the best that I can actually have. So he, last time we went racing, tried to make that part of his strategy where he slowed down the start because he was hoping that his clutch was set up better than everybody else's, and maybe he could break away from the pack right off the gate. And again, that comes from doing your homework, and looking and using data, because it's so powerful. It really is a powerful tool.
Absolutely. Tice asked the question, is clutch temp an influencer on the start? Yes, certainly. I mean, if you'd used it a bunch of times, a whole bunch of restarts, the clutch will start getting a little bit warm, right? And the more that it gets warm, and what I think we're seeing here is, and again, let's go back to this one and just use the delta function. I've got my delta function, by the way, set up where the show with delta, let's show average with the delta numbers. So now if I turn on my delta function and after it's taken, it's kind of set here, and we come down here and we go all the way till it starts to lock up, that number, that 3359, is the average clutch for that entire run, right? 3359. Everywhere in between the two lines of the delta is the first number here is the second click. It was 3322 right there. There's a 73 RPM drop between here and here, and the average is 3359. That is a number that I would put into my book and say, here's what our clutch settings were that day, and did they work, did they not, did we get pulled off the line, all those kind of things, right? But this is a really good way of understanding, instead of just clicking somewhere in that data and it's okay, my clutch is 3347 or 3376, because of the noise and the tire spin and the clutch chatters and all the different things. Getting a nice average is pretty nice. What do you think about repeatability and heat? Have you found the clutches overheat if there was a bunch of restarts?
Not in the junior classes. With the lower horsepower engines, we don't really see that a whole lot. But when you start getting into the open engines, where it starts, driving these go-karts, start getting a little wild, because then the power, the weight to power ratio starts getting up there. Yes, then you start seeing like clutches fail because they had too many restarts and they start slipping because they're holding down 40 horsepower instead of 9 horsepower.
A little harder to hold that, and of course when you get up there, they're the adult classes, so they're heavier on top of that, right? So you're throwing a lot more at the clutch. And repeatable, sure looks like it's repeatable for the most part. I mean, if we really look at this, if we put that here, it's 3375, 3321 between the two. The red, of course, being higher because the speed is higher, right? So it's to me, I have always found that these clutches are actually fairly repeatable as long as they're maintained. The air gap is right, and putting new the clutch plates and all the different things in them that it needs.
Spring height is consistent.
Yeah. Perfect. And one last thing is just how this was set up. This screen, I know some of you may be looking at it that have carts that haven't played with this much, but we have a couple of functions here I've used. I use the time mode because since the cart was stopped, if we have it in distance mode across the bottom on this x-axis, you can see time values down here. If we had it in distance, of course, the carts weren't moving when they were sitting at a standstill, so we wouldn't see this data leading up to the start. So we have to go to time mode to expand that out to see the numbers. And then we also use the snap on off. We've turned that off. It's no longer snapping to a lap of data. It's allowing the data to float free. And then I took the data and went down to where these two standing starts were. So that's a little bit of the background technical way of setting up a screen to look like this. Okay. Perfect. Let's go and look at
useful.
Let's go look at another set of data, and now we're going to get into some lap-based stuff that we're going to chat about. So I'm going to close these two tests, jack attack, tire roll, and we'll look at this set of data here. We'll open them up both at the same time. Open up the test, and I've got some profiles. We'll go to graph to start with. You tell me where you want to go here in a moment. I'm going to we had the GPS scaled in a way for the standing start stuff, so I want to do that, and maybe I'll just rescale that maybe just a little bit different still, and maybe 45, just give it some nice round numbers. Okay, so this is a couple of laps, and you shared with me some user profiles that it's not basic, it's just a speed trace, but you walk through some of these depending on what you're doing, and graph was one that you shared with me just from a speed standpoint. It just brings up a speed trace, and it allows you, this is the way you use them, it allows you at this point to bring up whatever next channels you might want to beyond that, right?
Right. So, it's like a blank canvas, really.
Yeah.
And when you're at the racetrack, again, we're talking about time. Sometimes you don't have time to do a lot of unique stuff. So I pretty much just use this as a blank canvas. And this is where I feel like, again, data is so powerful, because you look and you go, okay, well the stopwatch tells me it was slower. Yes, but it didn't really tell you why it was slower or where it was slower.
Yeah.
One thing that you notice, so what you're looking at is 2 different runs made about 20 minutes, 30 minutes apart. So the track conditions were the same. Everything was the same. The air pressure was the same. The tire age was the same set of tires. The gear was the same. Everything was the same. The only thing changed was the chemical applied to the outside of the tire. And it was the same amount of chemical that was applied to the outside of the tire. And what you see is one chemical was about in some areas about 2 miles an hour slower than the other chemical. But what gets really interesting, well, yeah, no, we're about 3 miles an hour.
Yeah, at the biggest point, yeah.
Yeah. So, but what gets interesting is, Roger, can you pull up the lateral G's?
I can.
If you notice that the lateral G's look about the same. So where the one chemical, which was a little more aggressive and had a little more grip to it, didn't really change how much the go-kart was gripping through the turns, but it did change to how well it rolled down the straightaway and how much speed it was allowed to gain down the straightaway. And that's, again, a big difference in just a small thing of adding a different ounce of chemical.
And again, the class that you're running in, and there's a lot of dirt kart ovals until you get to those big open karts. This is like Talladega. Your kid is flat to the floor, right? So straightaway speed is changing cornering speed, right? Because he's not lifting. So
right. And again, this is the most interesting part about this one is, again, that it still pulled the same amount of G's. The go-kart still made the same amount of grip around the turns, but down the straightaway is where you really saw that the tire with the more aggressive chemical didn't allow it to get up to speed like the first chemical did.
Yeah, you for those of us that are don't do a ton of dirt racing, we think, it's it's slippery and there's no grip, and that's what you're really fighting. There's a peaking of 2.4 G's in the corner. That is a lot of G force you're running on the dirt. So there's a lot of grip out there. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, the tracks, man, they get just about as hard as asphalt does, some of them, because the dirt is packed so tight. That, if you took a tire durometer out there, some of them read, if you have a digital one, 102, 103 points on a digital durometer.
Yeah, that's
pretty
crazy.
ridiculous.
Another thing that you do a lot, and just so people that are seeing this, you notice that our lateral G's, where a lot of our guys that turn left and right, they'll have, they'll scale it, -2 to +2, and you've got this thing, of course, it's left turn only, so you're only seeing the left hand corners. We've got it scaled to 0 here at the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. Those of you that with a real distinct eye that are really looking at the detail, you'll also notice that, and this is David enjoys looking at it this way for a couple of slides that are going to come. You'll see why even more in a minute, but he also likes to reverse his lateral G's, and there's some reasons behind that. So this, you're seeing positive numbers, and convention is left-hand turns would be negative values. So all he's done is reverse that channel, but we'll see that the reason why behind that in here in a moment. So, okay. Matt asked the question, do you ever change the chassis setup to match the chemical used? It's a balancing point, right?
Yeah. So yes, it depends on the situation, and it depends on not only what the data I'm getting from the Micron, but also physical data. Like I try to mix new school with old school.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, so I'll use data from the Micron like we are, but I'll also chalk my tires like I'm in Daytona, Florida, 1960 500. So I use tire chalk to see how the actual physical tire is distorting in the turn. So I might change my camber settings because of that. We were, at a track last week, and I started making not only chemical changes, but also chassis changes, depending on the situation. So you have to take a lot of factors in. Most of the time, most people just do tires. I try to do a good mixture of both.
Yeah, because it all affects it, right?
Right.
For those of us that are that haven't done a ton of oval racing, I did a little bit, so I think I understand what you meant by it. But you say chalk your tires, and you do the sidewall, right? And what you're doing, you're looking for is how much is the tire deflecting and how far up the chalk has been removed from rubbing on the track. It's amazing. When I did it, we raced Legends for a while, how much that tire will roll in the corner, and that's helping us with our cambers or tire pressures and some other stuff. It's amazing. It's up an inch or two up the sidewall that has actually been scuffed off by the track surface. Interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a little old school versus new school on how you're handling it. Is there a user profile we would look on this one, or do you want to go to a different data file before we move to the next one? The roll speed we've already checked out. Steering lat G is this one doesn't have the steering in it, does it?
Which one? No, this one does not have the steering in it.
Okay, no, let's change to a different one, and we'll go to our third example. We've got just about 5 or 10 more minutes, so I want to get to that. And so let's close this one. Which data?
Time goes away so fast when I start talking about that.
Exactly. I think it was camber, right?
Well, that's with the steering sensor. Do you want to look at the one with the gear?
Yeah, let's look at the one at the gear first, and then we'll come back to the other one if we have time. Okay. So this, and then which user profile is the one you might want to use on this one?
We can still stay on graph.
Okay. So I've just added the lateral. So here you what's the background on this? It's two different gear settings.
So on this situation, this is 2 different races at a track. A couple different things. So that night at the racetrack, it was extremely cold. Like if you look at the logger temperature, it was in the 30s.
37 and 36 Fahrenheit. Yeah.
The towels we were using to dry tires were freezing at the race trailer. And so we were having problems getting grip with the racetrack, because with dirt ovals, when it starts getting that cold, grip is at a premium. So one thing that we wanted to try to do is, if he was having, this is one of those situations where my oldest son, Jack, was having to get up out the throttle to make it around the turn and back up the turn. So we decided to change the gear ratio. So basically what you're looking at is the same setup for the most part. The only difference is the gear change. Can you bring up the RPM trace for me, Roger?
Can. Boom. There. Oops. Let's scale that. We still had it scaled on a. There we go. It's not perfect. Let me give the bottom of that. Sometimes it doesn't auto scale well when we do that. So, and let's apply and exit that. We should be able to see it all. There you go.
If you look, okay, so the green is with the gear change. We carried a whole lot more speed through the center part of the turn because we weren't losing the RPMs as great. And again, it comes to the power of data, where you can actually see, where am I losing time and speed? If you look at the speed trace, you see how much more sharp it is going into the turn, and where it starts losing speed, the decel is a whole lot greater than what it is with just a different gear on it. And you're able to break down sections of the track and the run to make adjustments, pointed adjustments for what you need. Most people just look at RPMs down at the end of the straightaway and go, oh yeah, well, my RPMs are in the power band, I'm good to go. But
sometimes they just look at a max number and call it good, right? And not understand where it happened. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I was more or less looking at, well, how many RPMs is it pulling out of it? And maybe it's not a go-kart or chassis problem, it's a gear problem, because we're not able to get the grip. Because at some point you have to give up on the fact that I'm never going to get the amount of grip that I want.
Right. And here you can see that, and you can see here that the grip didn't change. Like you mentioned, it was just a gearing change. So of course you wouldn't expect a ton of grip change, but you're a tenth and a half faster on one of them by making this quick change.
Right. The go-kart pulled up off the turn a whole lot faster because of that. Now, interesting about the lateral G in this example is, if you back up and look at a lap at the beginning of the run, and you can see where heating the tire and the chemical changes, where the go-kart was, to kind of give you an idea, because it's hard to see it unless you were there. go-kart was sliding a lot at the beginning of the run, and between laps 1 and 6, and then between laps 7 through 14 or so, it started gaining a pretty good amount of grip, enough where he started making his fastest laps, and then towards the end of the run, it started losing bite again. So you can definitely see how the trace smooths out because it's able to apply the grip to the racetrack in the middle of the run versus at the beginning or the end of the run.
I just did a trick.
Unloads.
And while you were talking about it, I was just doing a trick, and I just grabbed the one session, right, the blue one.
Mhm.
I do a trick that I do a lot in data, because you were talking about what the look and feel was over a number of laps. That one of the reasons I leave the test laps toolbar across the bottom is I grab that box and I'm just dragging it. Now you're just scanning the data, and I'm just scanning these lines here and looking at what that blue one does compared to the red one. And here in the middle, the grip was pretty similar, right? And you were talking about early on in the run, the grip was low. So I just drug that over here to 7 while my eye was up here. And boy, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you click in here, just kind of find an average, 0.4 G's less grip early until the tires got some heat in it because they were so cold. And if I drag this up, pretty soon we're matching what it was. And then, as you mentioned, that last it's starting to come off, right? Starting to not work.
And you can see how the go-kart is loading and unloading more instead of staying rolled over on the right sides as much.
Interesting way of looking at data. A couple more questions before we're gonna have to kind of wrap it up here. But Bruce asked the question: how do you track how fast the track dries out? I mean, that's another concern that you're gonna have, is you're doing all these changes on the kart, but your surface changes, right?
Right. So the hard thing about dirt oval racing is it's like trying to hit a moving target while you're also on a moving platform. And a couple different ways you do that, because everything, it's not just the Micron, you're pulling data from all different situations. So you're looking at lap times. Are the lap times speeding up? Or are they slowing down as the night goes on? Or is the sun out? How does the infield look? Is there moisture around the racetrack, not just on the racing surface? And you kind of monitor lap times of other classes. Plus, you start looking at like I take track temperature is a key big thing for me. Everywhere we go, I'm checking track temperature about 5-6 times a night. Is the sun out? Is the sun in? Is the dew falling? With the change of temperature when it goes into nighttime. All these things. You're looking at letting it absorb into your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. You're working hard with your data logger, and you're getting all that information, and there's other information. You're feeding it all together to build the best end product you can. I just find that it's intriguing. We're looking at some data here where these 3/10 that we're looking at here, David has found ways of understanding the forward, the stiction or the roll resistance of the tire versus the grip in the corners versus the gearing versus driven line. We didn't even talk about that today.
Yeah, we haven't got that far.
Yeah, but what David ends up looking for is, since it's only a 10 to 13 second lap, that a tenth is huge. Half a second is pull in the main to not making the main, right? And
right.
3 or 4 tenths. So he has found some ways, and we're gonna explore this more. We're gonna have David back about every 5 or 6 weeks, and build another. We're gonna build on this one and build to the next one. Charles has a question that we're not going to get into today, just because it's a fairly deep subject, but not being a kart or dirt racer, can you explain more the chemical part of the tire part? We'll save that for episode 2 or 3 of our dirt oval.
We need another eight webinars for that
one. Exactly. And it's an interesting subject, and we will do a little bit of that, but we'll take it from a data standpoint, right? You'll talk a little bit about the chemicals and what you did, but we'll show the back to back on data and keep it data related, obviously. So let's jump out of the data back to the presentation and chat a little bit about kind of closing this up, this data has been important. I hope that everybody that was watching, even if you didn't dirt kart race, you get some tips and tricks on how to use data. We only have an hour, and we needed to kind of intro the thing, so we only spent about half of our time looking at data. The next time we'll look at a lot more data as well. The those of you watching on YouTube, if you don't know where, obviously if you're watching on YouTube, you know where it's at. But those of you that are going to watching this live, if you want to watch it on YouTube, we've got the page. We've got 160 videos. This will be the next one that'll be up there here in just a few moments. I hope that we can share this one really wide to get to a lot of these dirt racers and give them a little bit of a primer on using data in dirt oval. And I hope the rest of you that are watching this got some other tips and tricks on how to use the data in a better way. Looking forward to doing more with David here in a little bit. The customer support, it is what David is building his business on, KartSpeed Solutions, and it's what we do here at AIM as well. So look for us at a track near you with our vans. We're out there every single weekend. Vans are somewhere. We also got guys going around and walking around with backpacks and checking up on you, doing the best we can. So if you have any questions, you don't see us at the track, we have an 800 number. Give us a call. We'll help you get your hardware up to speed. We'll help you, your software solutions. Make sure everything is working for you. It'll be a good time. Make sure you give us a holler. Oops. Our next webinar, I wanted to spend just a little bit of time. We've had this is one I've been wanting to do for 6 months or so, and I'm just trying to find figure everything out. We have built a with these webinars, we've got quite a community that we've built. We have folks that are here at most of our webinars, and they're all learning things. And I'm learning things from them with the questions they ask. I don't have answers, and so I got to dig in. And it's been just such a positive educational experience across the board. And one of the guys that's been with us here from the word go, and I think he's watched all but maybe 3 or 4 of them live, and the ones he missed, he watches on YouTube later, is Thijs Vinstra. Thijs has been here today in the chat box. Thijs is going to join us next week. Thijs is from the Netherlands, Denmark. I'm not exactly sure for full, but he's an interesting guy, a very, very smart mechanic, data engineer. And while he has a very good Netherlands, thank you, while he has a very strong background in mechanics and data engineering, he's joining us here every week and picking up little 2 or 3 things from all of our videos we've done. And what I really wanted to do is have somebody join us, and maybe we do it again in the future with somebody else that's been watching and learning and contributing, where we come in and just have a chat with them. What have you learned from these AIM webinars? What can you share with some of the rest of us? Ways you've applied some of this knowledge and send it back to the rest of us. Thijs is very active in our chat board while these are going on. He helps people. He's chatting with people on email and phone calls about stuff he's learning. So very, very much looking forward to having Thijs join us here next week, just to chat about what he's learned and what stuff he's shared from these webinars. I think it'll be fun. So looking forward to that, Thijs. We're going to chat in the next couple of days and fine tune exactly what we want to chat about. Maybe even in just in a half an hour after I get done with this one, maybe we'll have a quick Zoom and we'll figure it out. We'll have a good time either way. Looking forward to Thijs. Thijs has quite a reputation in motorsports and in the mechanical world, and he's a smart, sharp guy. So it'll be fun to play with, chat with him about it. But David, I appreciate you doing this. It's for all of us that do these things, it's a little bit of an odd thing. We're data guys, right? We got our heads down. We're motorsports guys. We don't necessarily like to talk in front of groups like this, but you did a fantastic job. I know you spent a lot of time preparing and getting stuff ready and passing data files with me and understanding what we wanted to do. Just super glad you were here. And I think there's been such great value for everybody that comes here, but even more so the dirt oval guys. And I really hope that we can get to and do this for a 3 or 4 episodes sessions to keep building on what we've just built and where we can share these with all sorts of folks. Again, I appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we're kind of closing this one up?
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to come on here. I really enjoy these webinars. I've been involved with a few of them, watched if I wasn't able to do it live, I've watched them after the fact, and it's just a real honor to have you for you guys to have me on, and I really appreciate it.
You're out there doing the work, and we really certainly appreciate it. I know we started chatting a couple of years ago, and you've shared some things with me that I didn't know, and I've shared some things with you that you didn't know. We've been building both of our knowledge from this conversation, so it's been really, really good, and I'm very, very happy you came on and shared some of that with everybody else. So appreciate it very much. If you want to get a hold of David for some more information, there's a email address down there in the below his name there on this contact information page. Give him a holler, drop him an email. He is just so happy to help everybody out and get everybody up to speed on looking at your data, and that we really appreciate him being out there. So thanks again. Just a ton, everybody. I appreciate you all being here. David, again, thank you very much. Looking forward to coming back and doing another one of these next Tuesday with Tice. It's going to be a great time. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next week.
Yes.